Hello and welcome to the training video. In this video we'll be discussing rates, rate modeling, and how to create your own rate in Metrix. One very nice feature of Metrix is that you're able to model the cost of your bills in several different ways. There's 3 methods available to you, and I'll be running through them in order of least to most accurate. Each method does have its trade-offs, however, and as a rate becomes more accurate, it starts to take a little longer to implement. The first option available to you is the average total cost per consumption. This is a very simple model, and all you'll need for each bill is a total cost and a consumption value. When Metrix goes to calculate the baseline cost, it will use the following equation. The biggest disadvantage to this rate structure is what happens if you have a month with a normal miscellaneous charge, but very low usage. Say for example that we have a $100 per month miscellaneous charge, but somehow we only used 1 kilowatt hour that month. This is going to give us an expected cost of $100 per kilowatt hour, which is obviously way too big. You can get around this by not entering your miscellaneous charge if you have that information, but if you've got cost broken down into monthly charges and usage charges already, I'd recommend the next rate option available to you. The next option is a bit more accurate, but requires more data. It's called average cost per consumption and cost per demand. It's much like the previous rate, except that it splits your costs into demand and consumption. To use this rate, you're going to need to have detailed costs for any time of use periods that you have listed. You can use this with consumption and demand, or if you don't have demand, you can just have consumption and it will work just fine. Going back to the meter setup, if you have these do not proportionally adjust boxes checked, your miscellaneous and credit charges are going to be preserved each month. Otherwise, they're going to be prorated by usage by an equation that we'll show you in just a minute. The equation for this rate is a bit more complicated, and it's shown here. This is assuming that you have those 2 boxes checked. As you can see, what we've done is we've split out the specific cost per consumption and your specific cost per demand, and then we've applied them back to the scenario usage. The scenario usage means just whatever scenario you're currently reporting on. So if you're reporting on baseline, the kilowatt hour scenario would actually be kilowatt hours baseline. The tax is proportionally adjusted and it's split between your kilowatt hours and your kilowatt charges. You can think of this somewhat like a voltage divider. It works the exact same way. If you don't have the miscellaneous and credit boxes checked to not have them proportionally adjust, they're going to use basically the same equation as the tax, and they're calculated the same way. If you're going to calculate this manually, you have to calculate your kilowatt hour dollars and your kilowatt dollars first, and then you'll be able to calculate your tax, and assuming that you're prorating your credit and miscellaneous as well. Another feature available with this method is the ability to set a monthly minimum value for your costs. I can do that up here. Right now I have it set to 1 minimum in either of these boxes, though if I check monthly minimum, this tab will appear up here. I can enter a minimum value per charge for each option, and I can also have them increase by a percentage value each year, which simulates how a typical performance contract is written. These 2 methods have the advantage of being very simple to implement and requiring relatively little data. In addition, you're guaranteed that your sim actual dollars will match your actual dollars when you go to report. The disadvantage, however, is that you won't be able to do any bill audits to determine if the utility company has made any errors. For that, there's the single utility rate schedule. Let's go back to meter setup and set it up with that. What this is going to do is allow you to model your own rate, much like the way the utility company charges you. We've got one set down here. To create one, you'd right-click on the meter, select New, and go to Rate. So we go here, and this is how the rate is completely set up. We have the name, a description, a utility company, and a rate type. You can select whatever you want here. And then we have the conversion factors, which you're not going to want to change. Then you've got the monthly bill minimums and some rate details where you can set things like tax. If we go down, you can right-click, select New, and add more charges. Right here we've got an energy charge that's set to consumption and a demand charge that's set to demand, and they're both set to on-peak. This time period shows when the bill is applied for that charge. The time period up here on rate is supposed to be used something like this is the rate schedule for 1990 to 1999, Whereas this charge is an annual charge. You could also set up charges to be seasonal, where you'd do this down here and set up maybe a winter energy and a summer energy. If you go into charge detail, you can set things like the monthly minimum service charge or even a daily service charge, minimum bill limits, and you can also set up a tiered rate. What this means is that the first 100,000 kilowatt hours will be charged at $0.064, and the rest, up to 400,000, will be charged at $0.057 per kilowatt hour. And if it ends in a zero, that means that any value above this last one is going to be charged to that. So anything above 400,000 kilowatt hours is going to be charged at $0.0414. Now that you've modeled your rate, you can see how it was applied by looking at the Sim Actual tab up here at the meter. As we've discussed before, this tab shows your actual usage and the simulated charge applied to it. For a rate schedule that you've defined, you'll want to confirm that you've done a good job modeling and spot check a few of the values. If you don't want to check your rate manually, you can use Report Maker to run a compare scenarios report and run the sim actual minus actual report. This is going to show you the difference between your rate model and the actual bill, which of course you want to minimize. Rates can be one of the more complicated parts about setting up a Metrix project, so if you have any more questions, I'd refer you to some of our FAQs, or you can always call Help Desk with any of your questions. Thank you for joining us.